The Symbio Scene is a concept I created in 2011 and have been developing ever since, and still in the process of developing it. It's based on the concept of symbiosis, which is the symbio, and the scene means era or age. And I deliberately created it in opposition to the concept of the Anthropocene, which is a well understood concept created in about the year 2000 by Crutzen and Sturmer. And it attempts to describe the current era that humans are in terms of the period of human dominance over all important Earth systems and geological and biological processes that are going on planet Earth. So it's a new era acknowledging the dominance that humans have over all things that are happening on this planet. I agree that the Anthropocene, that it does represent or capture something which is essentially true about the impact that humans are having on the planet. But unfortunately, the way I look at the Anthropocene is that it's a period of catastrophe. It's a period of lack of intelligence with respect to the relationship to the rest of the natural world. So I created the Symbio Scene as its direct opposite. Everything that the Anthropocene represents, the Symbio Scene is attempting to present the alternative or its opposite in order for us to have an intelligent relationship to the rest of life on this planet. And so I've gradually been developing this concept, the principles. I'm still doing that work, and I'm writing a book on the Symbio Scene this year. So I'm hoping to complete it by the end of the year. Well, that was just a simple division of things that are affecting human physical and mental health. The state of the world clearly has an impact on both physical and mental health. So a good relationship to a healthy area with good air, good water, clean food, non-toxic. I decided that there needed to be a category of health that connected to the earth and the state of the human body. So means of the body. So somatic means the health of people connected to the biophysical state of the earth, and psychotic is the area that, as a philosopher, more competent to deal with, but it's the area where there's an intersection between the state of the physical earth and mental and emotional states. And so the psychotic can be both positive and negative in the same way that the somatic can be positive and negative. Positive psychotic relationship usually involves a human being feeling at one with the home environment, that the life and ecosystems surrounding them are supportive of mental and emotional health, and that the combination of the two, bodily health and mental health, is the ideal state of being for humans. Psychotic is what I've had to specialize in, because that's what the Anthropocene is doing to our human emotional and psychological makeup. We're seeing a pandemic of what could be loosely called mental illness, but I would prefer to call it disease, where there's a hyphen between the dis-ease. It means a lack of ease. It doesn't mean something which is biomedically diagnosable or biomedically curable. Clearly, what I'm trying to point out with the concept of the Symbio Scene is that the causes of our physical and mental distress are structural in nature. They come from the particular kind of social order that we're living in now. And I think it's technically correct to call it a capitalist economic system, it's technically correct to call it an industrial and technologically driven form of social order. So if you want to find the drivers of somateratic and psychoteratic health in our global scale, that's where we look. That's the area or the data to examine from a causal perspective. So it has nothing to do with medicine. It has everything to do with politics, economics, culture, and the way humans interact with each other, power relationships, for example, and governance. Concept of solastalgia is now 20 years old. I created it in 2003. And again, I've been writing on this theme ever since. The term was created out of a need that I felt to describe what was happening to the emotional and psychological health of people in the area of New South Wales, Australia, known as the Upper Hunter. It's here that there are large-scale open-cut coal mines, and the coal is not only dug up and burnt in local power stations, it's also exported to the rest of the world, where it's burnt in the power stations and steel mills of the industrial centres of the world. It's a huge industry, and its impact. Even when I started, we're talking about hundreds of square kilometres of land that has been totally overturned. It gets blown up, it gets put into trucks, the rock waste is put onto flat top mountains. The coal, of course, is burnt or exported. So the impact of this industry on the people who were in the area was quite profound. The Upper Hunter was an area of land that was occupied by Indigenous people for tens of thousands of years. And of course, they were disrupted by the colonialism of the British, and their way of life was overturned over a period of a century or more, and probably continues to be disrupted by colonialism. However, in the 1960s and 70s, a new form of colonialism came into the Upper Hunter in the form of coal mining. A large and powerful force, uninvited, started to move into a substantially rural and agricultural area, and began to affect the mental and emotional health of people in that part of the country. It occurred to me that the people who were close to these mines were suffering from somateratic problems, because there's dust and noise and all sorts of standard physical impacts of mining. But nobody was focusing on the mental and emotional impacts of mining, and yet that's what people were complaining about. They were writing to politicians. There were newspaper articles about their distress. And I even at the University of Newcastle, which is the closest university to that area, were receiving phone calls from people who are desperate for help in the Upper Hunter, because although I was known as an environmental philosopher, they were so desperate, they were hoping that even someone like me might help. So I took that as a challenge intellectually and personally that I needed to understand what was going on with the mental health of the people of the upper hunter. And this is where this relationship between ecosystem health and human health can be very clearly illustrated. As the ecosystem was being desolated by coal mining, the physical and mental health of people was also being desolated. And that not only included those who were not part of the industry, but even those in the industry were feeling the negative impacts of these unwelcome changes. They had big salaries working for the mines, but their children were suffering from asthma. A lot of people felt anguish and distress about the impact that their own work was having on the state of the environment. And so with colleagues, Nick Higginbotham, who's a social psychologist, and Linda Connor, who's a medical anthropologist, I was able to do research investigating the particular distress that comes from people who are experiencing unwelcome change to their loved home environment. And I coined the term solastalgia to describe that particular distress because there was nothing in the English language to accurately describe. We use words like distress, or thousands, tens of thousands of things that humans are confronted by in their ordinary lives. Nothing in English that gave us an understanding of what happens to our mental and emotional states when the world as a biophysical process is impacted so badly and perhaps sometimes acutely, but mostly chronically. What happens to our distress when this biophysical change agent enters our lives? And so that's where solastalgia came from. It's the loss of solace from your home environment. It's particularly connected to the concept of nostalgia, which traditionally defined was a form of homesickness that people would feel when they were absent from home and wished to return. And solastalgia is also a kind of homesickness, but it's very particular in that your home leaves you. You stay where you are, but everything and appreciated, those things that gave you solace in your home environment are taken away from you. And quite clearly, mining is an obvious case, but more subtly, climate change is exactly the same process. So it doesn't matter whether you're experiencing this solastalgia as homesickness in the Upper Hunter region of New South Wales, or whether you're an Inuit person experiencing the loss of ice in the Arctic Circle. The distress is similar. The cause is similar in that it's a chronic change agent, which is unwelcome. And it's also incredibly difficult to see how you can be relieved or have this distress taken away from you. And so I think solastalgia has worked as a concept because it is applicable as a globally understood analysis of the distress that comes from having your home environment desolated by forces beyond your control. Well, it's both pleasing and, as I said to you before we started recording, kind of disappointing that solastalgia has succeeded as a concept, because it means that the conditions which cause it are expanding, they're not contracting. I wrote in my book, Earth Emotions, that I hope that the word solastalgia can be removed from the dictionary by 2100, because the Symbio Scene has come into being and the conditions that cause solastalgia have been removed from all human culture on the planet. The fact that it's become so well known and so well used is pleasing only in the sense that there was a space that needed to be filled in our conceptual world, that it does have application in so many different domains. The artistic domain is one that has consistently amazed and I guess made me feel that there was a point and purpose for doing the work that I do. I think artists are way ahead of philosophers and many others in that they see what's going wrong or what's going right, and they present to images which often we don't wish to see or be confronted by. And so the artistic world in all of its dimensions is one that constantly impresses me in its ability to see what is going on in a kind of raw and truthful way. I'm also, as a transdisciplinary thinker, I am pleased that solastalgia is understood in transdisciplinary ways. I didn't ever think that it was going to be a concept that would just reside within psychology, geography, anthropology, sociology, etc. I also, have worked within transdisciplinary complexity spaces. So as a result, I'm also pleased that the concept resides in those places as well. So I think in terms of the use of solastalgia internationally, its application to understanding issues beyond mining, particularly impressive. And I'm thinking, because I'm speaking to you, I had a look at some of my correspondence and publications from others that have really impressed me as understanding solastalgia and its applications. And one of them is Olivia Ramon's book, Thinking Like an Iceberg, where it's a riff on thinking like a mountain from Aldo Leopold, that there is a connection between the mining of coal and the distress of people in the Upper Hunter and the distress of people in the Arctic Circle. Obviously, if you think like an iceberg, what's melting you? What are the causes? What's the relationship between the ice and people? And it goes back to what's the relationship between coal and people in New South Wales. The ability of some people to see the connections, and as Olivia described it, thinking like an iceberg, it really does open up a world of possibilities in how we think, how we can understand and comprehend what's happening to us, and importantly, how can we respond. And so the fact that I can go from thinking about the exporting coal to importing climate change into Australia, but it goes beyond Australia to the rest of the world in every nook and cranny. There isn't a single part of the world now that's not being affected by the increasingly or the increase in the warming of the planet. I mean, I don't know if you're looking at the latest data from, but it's hugely scary, the rate of change that's happening just in the last year or even in the last few. So solastalgia begins to look like if only we could keep our distress at the level of solastalgia, that would be just fantastic. It's getting worse, and I have words like tierra trauma, which describe the immediate and acute impact of rapid change on our physical and mental health. And so when I look at what other people are doing, that solastalgia is reaching some kind of peak at the moment, but it could get worse. And as a thinker and a father and grandfather, that is precisely the situation I've been trying to avoid with my psychotic work over the last 20 or 30 years. So it's a very good question you asked me. There are now thousands of applications of the concept of solastalgia worldwide. And I think it's the effectiveness of it as a concept worldwide that I would like to highlight, and the work that I did in establishing it with my colleagues, Nick Higginbotham and Linda Connor, I think it adequately expresses the work, the value of academic work in an area that's often considered to be, non-economic. There's no cash value in this sort of thing. I feel that we did something significant in our research. We've published it. Uh, I I do I take credit for both the good and the bad things that have come from the publication of the concept of solastalgia, and I will continue to work with others who are trying causes, and that's precisely what I'm doing. Well, I was asked to write an essay on fire from I guess, a philosophical transdisciplinary perspective. The Good Folk at Humans and Nature, the journal, requested I admit something, and so I've written a short essay on the emotions of fire in the Pyrocene, which is another term that's now being used to describe this era that we're in. It's the late stage of the Anthropocene, where things are getting so hot that we just have to describe it in terms of fire. The Indigenous connection is one that where, having spent time in Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory of Western Australia, I was very fortunate to work and live with Indigenous people for a short period over 3 years. Every year for 3 years, I'd go and do research with others on fire and buffalo, feral blow. And I was able to see cultural burning, as it's sometimes called. I was able to understand the relationship to fire with Indigenous people who were still living a semi-traditional life. And of course, the role of fire in traditional society was one where it's strongly connected to a sense of order and a sense of place, in that fire is something which is used by humans to maintain and control their home environment in a way which continues to support them and to give them warmth, protection, and cultural order. And so I looked at the cultural connections to fire in Arnhem Land and other parts of Australia and compared it to what happens in the Anthropocene, when fire is no longer being controlled by humans, but it becomes part of an epiphenomenon of climate change. We lose control of fire, we lose control of our ability to manage our own home environment, especially if we're living in areas that are forested. And of course, now places like the Northern Hemisphere's boreal forests are burning. In Australia, alpine forest areas have burnt. Never before in geological history have they burnt. So this issue of the loss of control of fire is incredibly important, and one that needs to be told. So I wrote the essay in the hope that I could remind people that fire was not only welcome in traditional societies for the obvious reasons that it's used for warmth and cooking and various other ceremonial reasons, but that it was part of our being human to look after fire, to have rules connected to it, to educate your children around it. And when that's lost, and colonialism did that to Indigenous people, fire becomes a problem, and so does the order in society. And so this essay attempts to put order as an issue back into focus. And again, it's a bit like solastalgia, that in the English language we have words for the joy that we get from fire. So I've created a new concept that hopefully will be able to be understood by many in the essay. I've attempted to create another scene, another geological and cultural period in human history called the Indigenous Scene, where humans did once have, not only with fire, but with other cultural practices, a degree of harmony with the rest of nature. So I put fire back into the issues of our elemental relationships to the earth, and hopefully there's enough in there to really help people come to grips with our loss of control over fire. And ironically, it's the burning of fossil fuels that is at the heart of what's going wrong with fire. And I'm hoping that irony is not lost on people, that the solution to the problem of fire is to stop burning fossil fuels and creating greenhouse gases and destroying what remains of the viability of life on this planet. So it's a big issue, and I'm hoping that the essay that I've written is sufficiently controversial and hopefully creative, in that it gives people a new way of looking at a very old issue. I'm now a retired farmosopher because we've just moved from a property we called Wallaby Farm, which was a rural property on 5 acres with fruit trees and vegetable patches, and the ability to be semi self-sufficient with respect to some produce that we were able to produce. We also had chickens, and obviously we were able to eat eggs. So as a philosopher, while I was working on Wallaby Farm as a retired academic, I think of myself as both farming, i.e. producing something, and working as a agricultural type person and thinking at the same time. And I found it to be very, working with the earth was very conducive of good philosophical thinking. So farm and philosophy became farmosopher. But I'm now 70 years of age, coming very close to my 71st birthday, and I realized that as I'm getting older, it's getting much harder to do hard physical labor. So my wife and I have moved from Wallaby Farm to a place called Blackheath in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. And it's closer to Sydney, but it's at 1,000 meters. So it's an entirely different climate. And the way I like to think about it is that I've 5 private acres of beautiful land, which included rainforest and wild animals like koalas and wallabies, for 1 million hectares of publicly owned land, which is the World Heritage National Park of the Blue Mountains. So I haven't stopped gardening. I haven't stopped growing things. I've got well, we've only been here now for less than a month, so I've already got vegetables on the way. The garden needs some work almost every day. So I'm still a farmosopher, but I'm not on a farm any longer. I'm a suburban block, if you like. It takes only a short walk to disappear into a World Heritage National Park, which is so enormous that you can get lost, seriously lost, and have to be rescued. So I'm a retired farmosopher. I'm a retired philosopher, but I'm enjoying elements of that in my current life while I'm still reasonably healthy and able to connect to the earth. I think it was a good idea to become a farmosopher. I think if you read my book, Earth Emotion, little boy onwards, I've always wanted to be close to nature. I've always wanted to be more than close. I have a concept, a UT area, which is this feeling of being at one with that which is around. So I've always sought moments or whole periods of my life to exemplify that positive psychotic concept. So you meaning good, tierra meaning the earth, IA on the end meaning a state of being. I've always sought UT area wherever I live and wherever I go. And of course, to be able to live in that way in Australia is not that hard. I could imagine in places like East Coast, North America, most of Europe, that way of living is extremely difficult, and you might have to go somewhere other than an urban or city place in order to experience UT area. But they sometimes call Australia the lucky country. For me, it's lucky because I only have to walk 100 meters and I disappear into one of the world's great wilderness or national park areas. And so I accept that I am fortunate in being able to do that. And then I come back to my desk and I work and I write about those experiences. And it used to flow from my head to my pen, but now it goes from my head to my keyboard and even to places like Greenland, to people like you via our video technology. So I feel that those connections are really important, but I can't possibly begin them. They don't make any conceptual progress in me unless I'm close to biofuel nature. And as I said before, more than close, I'm actually immersed within it. I'm indistinguishable from it.